Bucka, 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 bucka. Ha You know the deal. This is me, dog. Beats by Supremo for all of my people, Negroes and Latinos, and even the gringos. Yo, check it, one for Charlie Hustle, two for Step.
So this is Politics with Mike Morris and Demian Nunez. So fellas, how you doing today?
Doing all right.
That's good to hear. That's good to hear. So, of course, I know y'all seen Tuesday's primary.
Mm-hmm.
Was it to the outcome that y'all expected?
Go first.
More or less.
Yeah, I mean, Trump did pretty well, especially in states that he was predicted to do well in, a lot of deep southern states, and I can't say I'm surprised by anything I saw.
No.
Disappointed? Sure. Surprised? No.
Yeah, I think it follows the trends we've been seeing over the past couple months. Trump's just gaining more steam as we go along. Gains even more steam. More people try to take him down, I think.
Yep.
And what exactly was you disappointed in, Mike?
Well, I've kind of hitched myself to the John Kasich wagon at this point, and he won nothing. He's kind of a low profile, though I think after Thursday's debate, I think people will really wake up and realize that he is really the only adult on the stage. We've got three simpering children here in Donald Trump, Ted Cruz, and Marco Rubio. And I think John Kasich is going to take him to school.
Yeah, I think Kasich is the strongest policy-wise. He is the most mature. He is the only one that's, gone out and said that he is going to try and cooperate with the Democrats going forward. He's trying to, reverse that increasing partisan trend whereby these other candidates marshal their support and their base by demagoguing the other side.
He's also the only one with executive experience. Governor of Ohio?
Yes, and I think...
Though how important is that to your average Republican? That's almost a liability today.
Yeah,
that party's climate.
I've always been of the, impression that people, governors, people with executive experience have done better in the office of president than, legislators have.
And Chris Christie said that exact same thing, and he's now endorsing Trump.
Yeah.
Makes no sense.
So elaborate when you say he's more mature policy-wise, because he has experience?
I mean, he's stronger policy-wise. He's, I think, outlined his plans better. It isn't, all about show. I mean, when you look at, people like Trump getting on stage and talking about their policy, they try very hard to invoke emotion more than anything.
I mean, he actually has solid things that he's going to do. Like, he brings up his past experience, and he talked about things he's going to do, as opposed to Trump, who was just, I'm going to do this, it's going to be great.
What are some of the policies? What are some of the plans he'd outlined for it?
Well, his main thing that he, again, might be a liability in the modern Republican Party's presidential political climate. He worked to implement, with Democrats, I believe, correct? To implement Obamacare in the state of Ohio, where he's the governor. And, I mean, you know Obama's legacy. I mean, they're going to take him to task, like some of the more extreme parts of the party are going to take him to task for not fighting that tooth and nail.
Yeah,
But it really shows, in my opinion, a respectable amount of bipartisanship, because that's what we need to return to, as opposed to two teams fighting against each other. Like, you can't watch politics like a football game.
Yeah, we need to understand that we're on the same team here, Democrats and Republicans.
We're all Americans. Like, I mean, I'm a diehard Steelers fan, and I'll root against the Ravens even when I'm not playing the Steelers. I hope they lose every game for the rest of forever.
Right.
But that's football. When the Ravens lose a football game, that's not going to cause massive unemployment in the Baltimore area.
Right.
Whereas when you watch politics, like you watch sports, let us win, let them lose, the country suffers. And I think John Kasich is the only one who gets that.
Exactly.
Yeah. He's been trying to, reach out. And I think, honestly, if he did get the nomination, which is honestly quite the long shot, I mean, he'd be the most likely to, I think, be able to beat the Democratic nominee because he has the ability to bring in people.
Yeah. Like, I've never considered voting for a Republican in the past, but Kasich is at the moment my choice. He brings in those moderate voters that are alienated by Trump's, anti-immigrant demagoguery, Rubio's establishment stooge type persona, and Cruz's religious conservatism. He's the one that brings in swing voters instead of alienating them.
Yeah.
And as far as Democrat goes, Tuesday's primary.
Clinton cleaned up.
Yeah.
Sanders won his home state of Vermont, and that's it. But again, a lot of Clinton's support comes from minorities, especially in southern states, where the majority of Democrats are black. So she won in, Alabama, Georgia, Tennessee, correct? Tennessee, South Carolina. South Carolina was earlier.
I think She won everything. That
She won
wasn't
everything.
Vermont.
Yeah, she did. I mean, she won South Carolina prior to Tuesday,
Oh yeah.
and she won Louisiana yesterday.
Mhm.
Like, she's doing very well in the South at this point, because among minority voters, who make up the majority of Southern Democrats nowadays, whereas Sanders is doing very well among young whites and rural whites. We saw him win in Vermont, his only win on Super Tuesday, and yesterday we saw him win in the rural white states, mostly, of Nebraska and Kansas. Those seem to be his major areas of support. Like, I saw a map from Massachusetts, which voted Tuesday, correct?
Yeah.
And Clinton ended up winning the state because she won the Boston area. She won Boston and its suburbs. Like, that map was all blue for Clinton. But you look to the rest of the state, you look to the central and the west, where it's more rural, more like Vermont, where Sanders is from, and you see these rural, mostly white voters going all in for Sanders. I mean, the western two-thirds of the state is for the most part a solid block of green. And I think that might be Clinton's biggest advantage, I suppose, yeah, where she appeals to minority voters in a way that Sanders does not.
And why do you think he's not appealing to minority voters?
Well, I mean, Clinton herself has said it, where it's nice that you marched with Martin Luther King 50 years ago, but that was 50 years ago.
Yeah, like,
what have you done for us lately, is what many minority communities are saying. But
I was about to say exactly what you said.
yeah, because Clinton had a great quote a couple weeks ago where she talked about how Sanders can talk about how he wants to break up the banks, break up the banks, break up the banks, all he wants. I mean, he talks about income inequality, he talks about the 1%, he talks about, potentially redistributing wealth. But Clinton's main jab is, what is he doing to alleviate unemployment in the now? Like, it's great to have a plan to,
Do you think
sort of Wall Street.
Do you think
yeah.
it's because he's not naming particular minority groups specifically, like blacks or Hispanics? Instead, he's talking about breaking up the banks that's going to help everybody, whereas Hillary is naming specifically who she intends to
Honestly,
help.
I think that might be part of the case. I mean, Hillary's been really trying to push herself as a champion of black voters, Hispanic voters, women voters.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I think Bernie's more than Hillary has tried to stay away from race and gender politics.
Right. I don't think Sanders sees race in the way that Clinton does,
Mhm.
because Clinton has talked about, like, systemic racism. She's talked about things like that in speeches, whereas Sanders seems to be more colorblind, talking about how we're going to break up the banks, we're going to do all my policies, and it's going to benefit all Americans, and it's going to be great.
Mhm.
It's almost like Trump in that way. They're kind of almost like a photo when it's negative, where Sanders talked about how he's going to radically change his country for all Americans, just in a very different way than Trump, whereas Clinton appeals to minority groups specifically, like you said.
Okay. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we'll be right back after these commercial breaks.
I saw reports last night that said Cruz won name.
And we're back, ladies and gentlemen, with Mike and Demian Talk Politics. So, fellas, Thursdays, GOP. Same old trend.
Yeah, except I think
Worsening
Kasich.
trend.
Yeah, but Kasich did a good job, stepping up.
Being a grown-up,
Yeah.
essentially. I mean, you've got, Marco Rubio talking about how Donald Trump has small hands. What else is small? I mean,
Yeah.
what is this, 9th grade?
Right.
They're great.
Yeah. And, I mean, Cruz is just continuing his... I mean, Cruz hasn't even been that bad. It's just his brand of very religious, evangelical conservatism. That mixture of religion and politicking is very off-putting to lots of people.
Mm-hmm.
And I honestly can't see him...
I don't see him
Winning,
pulling over, swing voters at all.
No.
I don't see him defeating.
And the thing is,
Hillary.
George W. Bush did the same thing. Bush talked about his faith all the time. But at least Bush had that likable guy personality type thing.
Yeah, he tried to be very.
He tried to be very relatable.
Whereas Cruz comes off as arrogant.
He's the most unpopular man in the Senate, and his freshman roommate, he went to Princeton, his freshman roommate hates him to this day. Like, check his Twitter. Honestly, I don't remember his name, or else I'll bring it up right now. But Ted Cruz's roommate is like a movie producer in Hollywood. And he talks all the time about how, this guy's running for president. I hated him then, I hate him now. My favorite one was...
the Cruz.
No, the Cruz, yes. But he would tell a story about how he used to get into senior parties when he was a freshman just because he was Ted's roommate. They'd let him in out of pity.
Damn.
Yeah, so he's not a popular guy. I cannot see him working the magic like Bush did
Yeah.
to get into the White House.
I mean, the biggest takeaway I've gotten from these last couple of debates is that as things go on, I think most of the other candidates are getting more and more desperate in their attempts to, stop Trump's,
Except for John, which is
the
why...
Trump train.
Well, which is why I'm hoping that Trump, Cruz, and Rubio will, because apparently Rubio has now shown that he is not above stooping down to Trump's level.
Yeah.
The three of them will be like crabs in a barrel. They'll all try to get up, they'll just bring each other down. And Casey, by staying out of it, I'm hoping can ride that to more electoral success. It's a pipe dream, but it could happen.
I mean, the debate before this one, when Rubio really started to come out as, sophomoric and inflammatory, trying to, behave like Trump, to be honest.
You can't, when you're an establishment candidate, you can't be Trump. When you've got Republican donors behind you, you can't act like a populist demagogue insulting people.
But I think that first time, a lot of people, they did say that Rubio, that was his strongest debate. He tried it again, Thursday, just completely backfired.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think it's just a show of desperation on his part.
And to go back to the Democrats, at this point in time, do you think there's hope for Sanders? Can he make a turnaround? Like, what needs to be done?
Good.
It would be a very long shot. I mean, Hillary's almost, halfway to getting the number of delegates she needs to get the nomination, and super delegates are almost completely behind her. Like a third, almost a third of Democratic delegates are super delegates, and they're not beholden to any, voting constituency. So they can vote however they want. So, it kind of looks like what happened in 2008. There were a lot of superdelegates for Hillary, but their votes aren't set in stone until the actual convention. So, if Sanders looks like he's picking up enough popular support, there is a chance that delegates might switch over to his side, like what happened in 2008, but that's a long shot, I think, because Sanders, I think the next couple of months might be over for him.
Well, for me, it's an issue of, well, first off, the rather undemocratic policy of superdelegates, where, there are people out there who, if the will of the people wants them to vote for one candidate, they can still vote for another, which is a hindrance to democracy.
Yeah.
But also, I think Sanders' main issue is the demographics he appeals to. He's got a great internet fan base. Facebook and Reddit go gaga over the guy.
Yeah, look at Shepherdstown.
Look at Shepherdstown. Everyone here supports Sanders. But the thing is, young white millennials are his base. And young people do not vote in the way that, say, the elderly vote.
Yeah.
You see so many Sanders stickers out now, but how many of these 21, 22-year-olds are going to get out there and vote for Sanders? It's a matter of motivation to vote. And I think many of these millennials are motivated for Sanders. They want to see Bernie Sanders in the White House.
But they need to turn out.
But they need to put their money where their mouth is and get out to vote, which historically they do not do. So Sanders has those two big obstacles to even the nomination, much less the general election.
Go vote.
Yeah.
Please
Go
do.
vote.
Yes.
Sanders would have a hard time appealing to swing voters too, I think, honestly.
Yep.
So.
Yeah, that and the youth thing, he calls himself a democratic socialist, and there are lots of people out there who don't grasp the difference between democratic socialism, and communism. They kind of throw them out under one umbrella.
Yeah.
And a lot of people out there can still remember the Cold War times, when communism was the enemy. State interference in the economy was the enemy.
How about you go ahead and clarify?
Well, communism is at its core, it's the workers own the means of production. Like, if you're working in, say, a coal mine, the miners own the coal. You're not at the behest of some big coal conglomerate who's screwing you around, making you, work for chump change.
That's the rhetoric, but in practice it is always, boiled down to state control, centrally planned economies. Yeah. So, they say, this government represents the people, this government owns everything, so the people own everything, which doesn't really translate into practice.
Marx would talk about just straight, the people own the means of production, but when Lenin came in and tried to expedite Russia's transformation away from serfdom, he kind of set the precedent that any future attempt at communist regime is going to turn into statist dictatorship pretty quickly.
Yeah. Heavy
state interference. Whereas democratic socialism, which Sanders espouses, is more like, he talks all the time about Denmark, Norway, Sweden, where you've got high taxes, but you've also got high reward. Strong safety social nets, universal health care, things like that. But the two kind of become conflated into this big, scary boogeyman that I think might scare a lot of voters, especially older voters who can still remember the Cold War away.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good point.
I think the ability for a, government to successfully employ, socialist elements, and I'll say socialist elements because I wouldn't consider, Denmark, Norway socialist countries. They have socialist elements.
They're democratic socialists. They got their democracy. These socialist parties are popularly elected.
Yeah.
They're still free enterprise. I mean,
Yeah.
It's just-
which is
Yeah.
a capitalist element. They're mixed.
of course. I mean, it's very. Honestly, it's a strong welfare state is the main.
Yeah, but they still maintain private ownership of businesses. The exchange of goods and services for legal tender,
Mm-hmm.
which
Yeah, they're capitalists like us. They just have a stronger welfare state.
yeah.
And your guys' personal take on Hitler.
Honestly, I feel like, especially whoever the Republican candidate is, honestly, especially if it's Trump, especially if it's Cruz, even if it's Kasich, whoever gets the Republican nomination is gonna sniff that red meat that is Hillary's tenure as Secretary of State, and they're gonna pounce on that. They're gonna talk about, they're gonna blame her for what happened in Benghazi, the 4 Americans dead in Benghazi. They're gonna blame her for the email scandal where she's alleged. Is it alleged or is it a fact now? I want to say alleged. I don't want to slander anybody.
I honestly can't say definitively, but
Okay,
I
I'll
mean,
say
it's
alleged.
pretty much
She's-
accepted fact that she did have this private server and
She's-
that there were classified communications transmitted through it.
Yeah. Basically, long story short, she used a private server of her own to do work email when she was Secretary of State, potentially classified or government information. And I think whoever the Republican candidate is going to strike on that a lot. And I think that might resonate with swing voters, like this person has been in the higher echelons of our government before and look what happened. So I think her tenure as Secretary of State could really come back to haunt her.
Yeah, but at the same time, I think people that focus, too much on attacking her for, those things and not the policies she's trying to push now, people might start to become numb to it. Because I know even a lot of conservatives, they got sick of hearing about the Benghazi thing
Yeah, wow,
after a while.
It's going to backfire.
So, I mean, you have to focus on the here and now, too.
Exactly. And takes on Sanders?
Sanders is going to really have his work cut out for him if he wants to get the nomination.
Yeah, I don't want to say he can't win, but he's got an uphill battle.
Yeah.
Struck down.
Yeah. Well, the thing I like about Sanders is, his proposed campaign reforms, such as putting a cap on corporate donations, because he wants to, he doesn't want money to be the primary driver of American politics. He wants policy and, proposed policies to be the driver, the people. I mean, that's something I can respect. I don't necessarily agree with many of his, economic and regulatory stances, but that's something I can really get behind.
Yeah, I struggle to embrace his full-on, democratic socialist principles. Like, I can see why people would support them, but I struggle to fully embrace them myself. But I do see where he's coming from on campaign finance, because there was a Supreme Court ruling from 2008, Citizens United, where, as it stands, as you or Demian or I, if we wanted to contribute to somebody's presidential campaign, we are capped at $2,500 right now. And the Citizens United case took all the caps off, correct? For corporate donations.
Corporate, yeah.
Basically, it's on road. Corporations are people, yet they're not subject to
The same restrictions.
same
on
finance
people.
restrictions that you or I would have.
Yeah.
So I
It's
mean,
pretty counterintuitive.
like I mentioned to Demi a moment ago, I feel like Sanders really believes about that, and I think if he could get a Supreme Court justice confirmed, because Antonin Scalia recently died, leaving a vacancy in the Supreme Court, if he can push his nomination through a Republican Senate, which is again unlikely,
Yeah.
because you have the gridlock. If he somehow could do it, he really could make his mark early by striking down that Citizens United case.
Yeah, and I think that would.
Or having somebody else do it, I suppose. But
And I think that would resonate with a lot of people, even, on the conservative side of things. Because there's a widespread belief in this country, even among conservatives, that corporations are too powerful and interfere with politics too much.
Saturday Rule Maine kind of surprised me, but kind of didn't. I'm honestly surprised that a very conservative religious person like Cruz won in Maine.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I'm also not surprised because Maine's governor, Paul LePage, recently endorsed Trump after trashing him a week before. But, he was a Christie man, and then once Christie went behind Trump,
Yeah.
LePage fell in line. But Google Paul LePage controversy if you want a fun read. But he recently went behind Trump, and he's not very popular in Maine because, again, look the guy up. But the only reason he's governor, he never won a majority. And he's been reelected twice, or elected and reelected. The only reason he's governor, the only reason he won his election, is because the Democrat that lost the primary for the nomination ran as an independent, splitting the Democratic vote and allowing LePage to win. He's never been elected governor by a majority vote, so he's pretty unpopular. And he went behind Trump because they're both, I'll call them demagogues. I'll call LePage a demagogue, but they're basically, if Trump were already in power as governor of a small state, he would be Paul LePage. And I think that really hurt Trump in Maine, the endorsement of their very unpopular governor.
I agree.
Yeah, Kentucky and Louisiana, another, again, southern states where most of the Democrats are minorities. So that helped Clinton.
Yeah.
Nebraska and Kansas for Sanders surprised me, but doesn't. I mean,
It's
kind of
rural
rural white people, but still, it kind of feels weird to see like Nebraska going for Bernie Sanders.
Yeah, I mean, when the choice is between, two Democrats in the Democratic primary, it doesn't surprise
Yeah,
me.
but still, I mean, yeah.
Who do you guys hope to see go at it for the presidential?
Kasich versus whoever. Is this my personal opinion?
Yep.
Kasich versus whoever, and I'll vote for John.
I agree as well. I mean, Kasich's the only adult on the Republican side. I'm not a fan of Hillary, and Bernie's economic plans are a bit too radical for me.
Agreed.
Ladies and gentlemen, tune in next week for Digging Deep with Diggz. This has been Mike and Demian Talk Politics.